Welcome to a new episode of Leadership Live. I am so excited to have you on the show, Julia, today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Daphna.
And I will start. I know this has been a long time in coming. There have been so many things that have happened in between the first time we spoke and now that we're getting a chance to record. And I'm just going to introduce you a little bit and then we'll dive into our conversation. So today we've got Julia Lessing. She is a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries Australia with 20 years experience as a consulting actuary. She's also a certified organizational coach and an experienced counselor. And this is what drew me to you, Julia, because that's something that we have in common, right? Being an actuary and a coach, counselor, all that background. So I haven't met another person like me, and all of a sudden I found you, and it was just really delightful. So that makes me excited. A little bit more about you. So Julia established Guardian Actuarial in 2015, where she is the principal actuary and director. This is a boutique actuarial consultancy helping clients across a range of industries use data to solve complex, people-oriented problems. She's leading a mission to foster forward-thinking leaders in the actuarial industry and runs the Guardian Actuarial Leadership Program to help actuaries build their management toolkits and leadership skills. Julia is a mother of 4 adult children and a regular contributor to the community, having volunteered as a qualified counselor for Lifeline and keeping our young people safe as an authorized foster carer. Julia, I think you're amazing. Welcome to the show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. There's just so much, commonality between us. And I think every time we have a conversation, we really just dive in deep because we have so many common interests. And I think one of those is just a passion for introducing leadership skills and what you call a management toolkit for our clients that are experts, leaders and experts, and particularly actuaries for you. And for me, I work a lot with actuaries because of my background, but they often don't have the skills to transition from expert to leader. And this is something that I think is crucial because as actuaries and knowing that background, actuaries are really ambitious. They're super intelligent. They really want to progress and do well in their job. And we know that as they progress and they get to a certain level of leadership, there are other skills that are required in order to really succeed. And those skills we don't learn in actuarial school, or in our actuarial degree.
Not. That's right. Exactly right, Daphna. We do not learn those skills. And I think one of the even trickier things about building those management toolkit skills, as you describe them, is that for so long we are focused on our actuarial technical exams and we get really good at doing our self-study, solo study. We're sitting at our computer, we're building models, we're doing our maths, we're learning our theory, and we do most of that on our own. And then when it comes to building management skills, you can't do that just by reading a book. You have to talk to people. You have to put yourself out there and maybe risk making a fool of yourself. And that can be really daunting and really scary, but we can't learn those management skills just by reading in the same way that we learn our technical actuarial skills. And you're right, nobody teaches us how to do this. So it's a real gap, but it's really critical for us to be successful in our careers.
Yes. And I just love that there are people in this space like you and me who are really focusing on making a difference there. I really do want to touch on what you said about you can't read about these skills and learn them in a book. You can. There are so many books on management skills and leadership skills. And I think it's important to read them and it's important to know the theory. But you can't actually really become good at it if you don't practice it and if you don't get feedback and if you don't work with it all the time. It's not theoretical knowledge. And the other thing that comes up for me there is that, with actuarial skills, it's like you either get it right or you get it wrong. Yes, for sure. There's a lot of forecasting and trends and modeling, which isn't always about right or wrong, but you can't always get it right, but there is a solid answer. And with management and leadership, it's a lot of trial and error. You've got to try, you've got to fail, you've got to make mistakes so that you can learn and move on to the next thing.
That's so true. That's so true. And, to take your analogy and build on that, Daphne, when we're doing our technical skills, we often have maybe it's an Excel model or a piece of code, and it's fairly predictable because we've built the parameters into it. And so it might break, it might not give us the right answer that we're looking for, but we kind of know what we're playing with and we know how to tweak it to kind of get it right. There's a formula, there's a systematic approach to our modelling. But when it comes to being successful in our interpersonal relationships, which is what we're really talking about with management and leadership skills, it feels less formulaic. It feels sometimes
formulaic. Right?
Well, it can't be because, humans are all on a spectrum of difference. We all have differences. And so no two people will be exactly the same. And even no two interactions with the same person will be identical either because we vary from day to day. So
Absolutely.
It can feel like there are so many solutions to those interpersonal interactions compared with some of our more concrete technical skills.
Right. So I want to, for starters, just do something a little bit fun because it's exactly what you're talking about. It's not the concrete formulaic. We are going to have a gorgeous conversation here. And I've picked out some 10 questions that are just fun, out of the blue, a little bit different. So I'm going to ask you to pick a number from 1 to 10. And let's see what comes up. So surprise packet.
So my analytical brain is probably wanting to go for the midpoint. So I'm going to pick 5.
Midpoint. Okay. So let's have a look what we've got in question 5. Okay. If you could choose one superpower to help you in your leadership role, what would it be and how would you use it to empower your team?
That's a really great question. What superpower would I use? I think it's probably the power of reading minds. That would be a great superpower to have.
Yeah, that superpower. Awesome.
Well, I wish I did. Are we talking about actual superpowers or imaginary superpowers?
I like the imaginary superpower. I think that's a good way to go. I love that, actually. Yes, if we could read people's minds. But actually, I do want to think about what is a superpower that you have, a real one, because we all have superpowers, right?
Okay.
Unique gifts that we bring to our role in our leadership and our work and our life, I suppose.
Well, it's a really good question, Daphne. I would say that probably my most powerful superpower when it comes to leadership and management is the ability to listen. And I don't mean just the ability to hear what someone's saying to me, but the ability to listen beyond the words and to listen for cues in what they're saying and to be able to put yourself in their shoes and to empathise and to understand where they're coming from. Yeah. Because I think when you can listen beyond the words and you can really hear what someone else is saying, it gives you so much information to be able to firstly connect with that person, but secondly, to understand where they're coming from, because it's easy to assume that everybody thinks like us or makes decisions like we do, but in actual fact, it's quite rarely true. Everyone has different things going on. Everyone has different superpowers of their own. Everyone has different objectives and drivers and goals and values. And I think if you can really tap into that active listening and hear what the other person is telling you, not just their words, it can be really powerful and really, really helpful in building relationships and also being able to reduce frustrations and misunderstandings.
Yeah, and I think thank you. I think that's such a beautiful superpower. And I think that, often I say that is one of the key skills that we need as leaders, because that makes the difference between someone who has this command and tell approach where do what I say because I'm the boss and I'm telling you to do it, and someone who really takes the effort and spends time bringing the team along and listening and understanding and getting to the depth of what's really going on is something that's going to take you to the next level in terms of how you lead. So that's a wonderful question. I think it leads me and connects with what we've been discussing until now, which is that transition from expert to leader, and how the basis of that is relationships. And listening is the basis of that. So I would love to hear from you, since you do work with so many actuaries. What would you say are some of the challenges that you find actuaries face when they make that transition? So they've done really well, they've been promoted, they're now in a leadership position. What do they find really challenges? What are some of those challenges that they experience?
Well, it's a great question, Daphna, and there's lots of challenges. I'd say that no two people have the same challenges, but some common challenges that I hear. One of the most common challenges is probably the ability to step back from the technical work themselves and to trust that somebody who's maybe more junior to them, maybe less experienced than them, can do the work that maybe they've been doing before and still do it well.
Right.
Being able to
letting go of the control there,
letting go.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that, because I think as we go through our actuarial technical training, we really start to identify with our ability to do these calculations and to build these models. And so because we spend so much time investing in those skills and learning how to do that, when we make that step out from being the individual contributor to maybe a team leader, or we've got some people who are helping us with some of that work, it can feel like, well, what's our job now? We've been training to be able to do that. And we get to the point where we're quite good at that, and we like the way we do it. And we have our certain quirks in the way that we like to set up our models and set up our spreadsheets or write our code. And so stepping back
in the comfort zone of, I can get this right, I know what I'm doing, so I can get it right, and I know that it's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. But then I think we're almost set up to fail in some ways when we're promoted to a team leader role, because as you said right at the start, Daphna, we're not taught how to do this in actuary school. We're not taught how to manage people. And so what I often hear is, well, what's my job now? And how do I manage this? How do I manage high quality technical work when I'm not doing it myself? How can I trust that somebody who's new or straight out of university is going to look after my model and get the right answer? How do I do that? And what if they're not doing it my way? How do I know that they're going to get it right?
So you're highlighting two things there from what I'm hearing. One is, how do I know that they're going to get it right? And the second is, how do I trust? How do I trust them to actually do the work the way I would want it? And those are two key ingredients there,
Absolutely.
So what advice do you give? How do you approach this?
Yeah. So one of the modules that I teach, actually the very first module that I teach in my leadership program, which is a small group program where we learn these skills together, is about managing high quality technical work. And part of it is around, firstly, the mindset of going, okay, well, now I'm a leader, or now I've moved into a management role. I can't do all of this work myself.
Right.
I need to step back. There's not enough hours in the day, even if I wanted to keep doing this all myself. And I need to create an opportunity for the junior team members to start to learn some of the things that I once had to learn too. So the first step is that mindset of going, okay, this is not my job anymore. My job is actually to supervise, to teach, to coach, to step back, and to do some other things. So once you've got the mindset right, it's about building systems and processes. How do you put some checks in place? How do you put some balances and systems in place so that you know what's being done? You can teach your junior team members how to self-check their work, and so they're taking some responsibility for the quality of their work as well. You're building dialogue, building confidence, and building trust with those junior team members as well. And trust is a two-way street. So coming back to that active listening.
For sure.
So, so many different facets of that, which is why it's so hard, because it's not a one size fits all. It's not a quick fix to do all of those things at once.
Exactly. And it's a process, right? It's
there's
learning. There's how do I do this? So, the other thing you mentioned earlier is, okay, so how do I figure out what my job is now? What is my role if I'm not doing that technical work? So it's defining that, figuring it out. It's understanding how to get the job done right. through other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that layer of trust, which is, okay,
Yes.
I really need to trust my people. And I also need to trust that if they make a mistake, it will be okay. You know, we will fix it. But it's part of the learning process and allowing that to be, which I think is a big challenge.
It's a huge challenge, Daphna. And so that mistake part, that's the second part of that module that we teach. So the first is the mindset, the processes, the systems, the checks and balances. And then the second part is going, you know what? Sometimes mistakes will happen. It's not about doing everything you can do to completely prevent a mistake, because you'll never do that anyway.
Yeah.
It's about doing what you reasonably can to prevent a mistake. And then it's about knowing what you'll do if you find a mistake, how you'll handle that mistake, what you'll do about it, what you'll do if you discover a mistake in your team, how to build trust in your team so that if they make a mistake, they can tell you and you know that it's there and you can handle it.
Beautiful. I think as you were talking, this metaphor came to mind, a story that I feel like I really just want to share at this point. And that is, you know, we went whitewater rafting on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe, which is a beautiful experience. And I'm sure there are other places in the world that are beautiful, but this was magnificent. And it was scary at the same time. I think it's one of the longest routes that you can take on whitewater rafting. And we, you know, signed up and had to sign those indemnity forms, and we get in the boats, and like all I'm doing is praying that I don't fall out of the boat, because I'm super scared. They tell us about the crocodiles and all these things, and how, what if I don't get back in the boat, or what if I land up getting into, because they say if you fall into the water and you missed your boat, the next boat will pick you up. And I thought, then I'll spend the rest of the journey without my husband, and that will be awful. So I mean, all I want to do is not fall out of the boat. So like every time we hit a rapid, I'm holding on to the ropes, you know, holding on for dear life, that I just don't fall out of the boat and the boat doesn't flip and all of that. And we passed the rapids. There about, can't remember how many, it was a long time ago. But let's say, I don't know, there were about 18 or something. It was really long. And we get through. And I think at number 12 or 13, what happens? The boat flips. When the boat flips, you are going to fall out of the boat. There's nothing you can do. So fell out of the boat and whatever. And it was actually fun. And we all got back on. And it was all part of the fun and part of the experience. But what I realized at the end of it was that the experience that we had with the boat flipping and falling out of the boat and getting back in and not being eaten by a crocodile actually made the experience that much more fun and that much more exciting and that much more, you know, experiential. We experienced something different. And if we had gone through the entire ride or route without falling out, it would have been beautiful. But it added another dimension, falling out, which was even more adventurous and even more fun. And for me, that really
adventure to the story.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it really ties in with, you know, that was the mistake, but it added a whole element. And it makes me think about the actuarial exams as well. You know, that whole ride of writing and passing some and not passing others and getting through the experience and learning from the ones you didn't pass. And it's tough. It's a tough ride, but it's worth it in the end. It is a tough ride.
Is it? So what an interesting story, Daphna. So you were worried about falling out, but then you did fall out, and actually that was the highlight of the
Exactly,
adventure.
that was the highlight of the whole thing.
And as I was listening to you narrating the story, what I was thinking with the first part of the story, you're holding on for dear life. You're holding on to make sure you don't fall out of the boat. And I was thinking, I wonder how much different your experience might have been if you weren't so worried about holding on and you could have enjoyed all of that beautiful scenery for that first part.
So true. And that's what happened after we fell, because after the boat flipped, because then it was like, oh, it happened. Not the end of the world. It was okay. Now I don't have to worry about it so much. I can let go. So you're right. Yeah, good.
You can relax and enjoy it. Yeah.
So I want to now get into your story. Yeah, thank you. I want to get into your story a little bit, because I'd love to hear. I'm curious about, where did you learn your leadership skills? Because as you said, not natural for actuaries to, and I don't want to generalize here, because I think that a lot of actuaries and a lot of experts do have that natural ability to fall into the leadership space and walk into. I think it's a minority, but I think some people do. For the most part, I think it's really hard. It's not a natural thing to combine both being an expert and really good at what you do and having that awareness of leadership skills and really wanting to explore more. So I'd love to know your story.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess professionally, my leadership journey started because when I first started my career as an actuary, I already had 3 children and I had a fourth one not far away.
Wow.
So at that point, I probably already had some parenting experience, some life experience that probably informed some of that management leadership.
Actually amazing. Because I'm going to just step in there for a moment, because I think that leadership skills do come from life experience much more from business experience, and that gives us that first foothold into what does it look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think that really gave me an advantage, because I think it had already put me in that mindset of, this isn't all about me. This is about my little people. When I'm talking about my children, when I'm in my little people at home, and then in the workplace, it's about, well, how do I serve my team? How do I look after them? How do I nurture them? How do I create opportunities for them? So I think that mindset, I probably had a head start on that when I started in the workforce because I was already a mum. I think winding back from there, though, I'm the eldest of 4, so there's probably a bit of childhood innate or good opportunity to learn some leadership skills at a young age. But I also found myself in my teenage years quickly being promoted into supervisory roles. So I had a part-time job after school when I was in high school as a checkout register operator, but very quickly I found myself supervising the register operators. And so that was my first taste of leadership in the workplace. We were involved in the Army Cadets in high school as well. We did a lot of adventure training, not whitewater rafting, quite like what you're talking about, but we did some great adventuring. But as part of that, they taught us the discipline of looking after a platoon, looking after and being responsible for people. And I think that really helped my mindset as a leader, that it wasn't about me being the boss or me being in charge or me getting what I wanted or me needing to know all the answers. It was about me being responsible for a group of people, knowing that they all have different needs and individual needs, but how do we balance the individual needs with the needs of the collective?
Beautiful. And I love how you've looked at it from the journey of your life experience and how that kind of brings you into the workspace, and with that experience of what it means to be responsible for people, what it means to be in a leadership role. So if you can talk to us a little bit about how did you bring it into, or how did you realize the importance of integrating those leadership skills with the actuarial work? Because I know, from my own experience, actuarial work, for me at least, was so focused on performance and results and doing things right and building the models and doing the work. There wasn't an emphasis on leadership. So when was that something you brought in? How did that integration happen for you?
It's a really good question. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when it happened, because I think it probably started right from the get-go. I've always really liked working with other people. If I was sitting behind a computer crunching numbers all day, 5 days a week, I would not be happy doing that. I like talking to people. I like listening to people. I'm curious about people. And I like that satisfaction of working together with people to achieve an outcome. And so probably right from the start, I was fortunate enough to be in a consulting environment. So we had, even when I was a graduate, we had summer vacationers and interns, and it felt very natural and easy for me to try and give them things to do, try and find opportunities for them to get involved. And, that's win-win for everybody, because they get to learn something, even though you might think that what you're giving them is boring. It's interesting to them because they've never done it before. But also it frees you up to do other things that are more interesting for you as well. And we all get to grow and challenge and be challenged and develop. And I think learning new things and growing has always been one of my core values. And so it was quite easy to bring that value to work and to create opportunities for me to learn myself, but also create opportunities for those around me to learn as well.
And I guess what I'm hearing is that maybe this was a natural part of who you are, that whole curiosity about people and how to develop people and how to bring them in and work with them. And that's something that naturally evolved into how you showed up as an actuary. I'm curious about what you'd say to someone who says, I just don't have that curiosity about people. I just want to get on with my work. That's what I love. I love my work. And now having to deal with people, and sometimes people who don't do what you ask them to do, and everything just seems like such hard work. What would you say to someone like that?
Yeah. One thing that was quite helpful for me too was discovering that actually communication and leadership skills, we have a tendency to think of them as less black and white, because they are less black and white because we're dealing with people, compared with our mathematical skills, our actuarial skills. But actually, you can break down communication, management, leadership into a toolkit, to use your words, a set of micro skills. And probably would have been about 15 years ago now, I actually trained, you mentioned this in the intro, I trained to be a counsellor for our crisis telephone hotline here in Australia called Lifeline. And what I learned when I went through that training to answer the phone, you pick up the phone for Lifeline, you have no idea who is calling. You have no idea what they need, what's going on for them, and what you're going to need to do to help them. It could be anything. But what they taught us in the Lifeline training is a set of micro skills that you can mix and match to answer any call. And the way they taught it was very methodical, very systematic. It really appealed to my analytical brain.
Yeah.
And I realised that actually I'd felt for so long that communication and those other interpersonal skills were actually very more of an art than a science, and maybe harder to learn. You either know them or you don't. But actually, as I started to get into learning how to be on the phones and how to answer the phones, I realised that there are concrete skills, there are micro skills that we can learn.
Yeah.
And so I guess to answer your question, if there was someone who was saying, I just can't do that, that's not my strength, I would counter that and say there are ways that you can learn certain skills that will help you in those situations. Yeah. Even if you are the most technical actuary, very logical, very structured, there are things that you can learn to make it easier for you to navigate those grey areas.
I really do want to strengthen that point, because I believe that as well. You don't have to be the most charismatic, dynamic people person. I mean, I think that would, for someone who's an introvert who really does love doing the work that they were trained to do, that could sound awful and scary and horrid.
Terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying, exactly. But there is a way to get to a level where you can do it in your own style and in your own way. And what I see is that experts, doesn't matter in which area, whether it's actuaries or lawyers or engineers, do come because they are intelligent and driven and ambitious. They come with this desire to want to progress in their careers. And I think when you do progress to higher levels, you need to be dealing with people, regardless of whether you're managing a team or whether it's peers or other stakeholders. You're going to need to learn those relationship building skills, those communication skills. And as you say, they are skills that can be learned. There are things you can do that will tweak your approach, that will just make it a lot easier for you as well. So thanks for that.
Absolutely.
I know that you spoke about 2 key leadership learnings that you've experienced through your life journey, and I'd love to just touch on those before we end. So I don't know if you remember what they were, but something around careers are not linear and the blobs. And the other one was apply the time value of money to your career. So I'd love to hear a little bit about those two.
Yeah. So the careers are not linear one. This took me a long time to learn. And I think this is also one of the things that I find actuaries come to me for help with, because they have, and I think I know why we all fall into this, many of us fall into this trap. We have such a clearly laid out set of exams for us to complete to get qualified to become an actuary. There's not very much in the way of choice or options. We basically have to follow the rungs on the ladder to get qualified.
And it's very clear. The order is clear. It's very linear.
It's very linear. It's very linear. And so I think we get to the end of that line, the end of that ladder, and we get qualified. And so it's not unreasonable that we look for the next rung on the ladder. We're just looking to keep progressing. And we've almost been taught that we need to get to the next level, pass the next exam. So quite often when actuaries get qualified, I hear them saying, well, I don't know what's next. I don't know what to do next. And it's because we've never had to think about what's next. It's always been laid out for us.
Right.
And so at that point of getting qualified, that can be a tricky time for actuaries, and also at the mid-career point too. So there's often, once you get qualified, there's often a series of rungs after that you can quite logically follow if you're in a company or if you're in a consulting role. And then you can find yourself mid-career and think, well, I don't know what's next on the ladder. And I'm not going to take anything unless it's a promotion and it comes with a pay rise. And so that can be really limiting though, because as actuaries, we are paid quite well, and looking around at what else we might do, it really can require a big shift in our mindset in terms of, well, what would a sideways step look like, and how would that help? Is that going to, what will that look like to other people? Will that help me feel like I'm getting ahead? And so often we do need to take sideways steps or add extra things into our experience, whether it's at work, whether it's volunteering professionally, whether it's volunteering in our community, whether it's taking some time out to study, time out to look after our children. So many different ways that we can add things to our pathway that makes it more like a blob than a ladder.
Exactly. I love that. I love your description of blob versus ladder. And I think that it's about, maybe going sideways to broaden our experience. And I think when we're looking at the pathway to leadership, that's exactly what it is. There is no straight line there. And every element of experience just builds onto how you are going to develop yourself as a leader.
That's right.
So I love that.
That's right.
And the second one, tell us about the second one.
So the second one is around the time value of money. So I am a really impatient person. I mean, I had 4 children by the time I was 26. I
think that's amazing.
I just really wanted
about 26.
I just really wanted to get out there and experience everything that life had to offer. And I was, I've always been quite impatient. Maybe I could reframe that and say I'm quite driven. But what I realized is that actually sometimes you do need to be patient for things. You need to just allow the time value of money or the time value of your career to emerge. Things don't happen overnight. And sometimes I hear younger actuaries quite frustrated that they're not getting promoted or they're not getting the next opportunity that they're looking for, but actually they're straight out of university and their expectations around what those markers of success look like might be somewhat out of alignment with what other people are able to offer them. So I think part of it is around, it's not a race to the top. It's not a race to the top with your career. As we said before, it won't be linear. And to go back to your whitewater rafting analogy, it's not a race to the bottom to make sure you don't fall out of the boat. It's about enjoying the scenery on the way down.
I mean, everything you're saying is resonating so much for me and my journey, because I think I was exactly in that place. I think when I look back, I was in that place of careers are linear. I'm going to climb that ladder. There's a very clear path. I'm going to do it quickly because I'm impatient, and I'm going to just do what I need to do. And I was very singularly focused on my career path. And it took me a while to really see. And I think it came from a level of just discontent inside that something, even though this was my path, something didn't feel
Feel
right or quite as
Mm.
much fun as I wanted it to be. And then understanding, what do other experiences bring into my life? What do I really want to do? What gets me excited and passionate? And how do I bring that in? And, just taking a breath and saying, what do I actually want to experience rather than where do I want to get to? And I think
Yes.
that's key, absolutely key. And I know one thing that I think about if I had to give advice to my younger self is just do way more networking, and not in the icky way of networking of like trying to get something out of people, but rather meeting people, building relationships, meeting as many different people as possible, just expanding your networks. That would be my key advice to my younger self. I'm wondering what would be your piece of advice to your younger self.
No, I think that's great advice. And I give that advice too, because I think and that's my strategy, that's my approach to networking. I often think maybe I should be more strategic when it comes to networking, but I'm not. I'm quite organic. And I tend to build connections with people that I enjoy spending time with, because I think what's the point in networking with people on creating opportunities for work with people that you don't really like or you find difficult to work with? So I think that networking piece is really important. And if we apply that time value of money to that if you build good relationships with colleagues and people in your network, over time, you will grow up and you will become the decision makers and the leaders. And so it's worthwhile investing in those relationships, because you'll have a much better journey to wherever it is that you're going. And you'll find yourself, before you know it, in more senior roles altogether.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so coming to a conclusion, I've got just a couple of questions that I'd like to ask, and then I usually end off with. So the first one is, in moments of doubt or uncertainty, what is a mantra or a piece of advice that you turn to for guidance and motivation? Here's another one. What's a book, movie, or piece of art, song, anything that has impacted your perspective on leadership?
So there's two books that I can think of. And I hope you don't think this is cheesy, but one of them's yours on your climb to Mount Kilimanjaro. I love.
Let's be clear, there's no payment involved, no exchange of anything happened here for this endorsement. Thank you.
I purchased the book off Amazon. I love the way that you narrated the challenges and getting to the end of just not knowing if you could go on at certain points. And I think there's some really powerful parallels between that process and the process of growing a business, having a career, navigating life is knowing that it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be smooth sailing, that there will be challenges, and that everyone has challenges, and that's normal, and that's part of the process.
Awesome. Thank you.
The other one, and it's probably similar, it's written by an Australian-based entrepreneur who started his own business. And he talks about leaving the corporate world and starting his own business, and very honestly and openly shares some of the challenges and the self-doubt and is this going to work, and how long can I do this for, in a way that's very human and relatable, and also just reminded me that it is normal that sometimes things won't go according to plan. And even the growth of a business is not linear, that there'll be ups and downs, there'll be waves and turns, and that's normal, and that's okay. And it's not about avoiding them. It's not about avoiding falling out of the raft, or just hanging on so tight that you don't enjoy the journey. It's about putting your processes in place and just floating down the river and just experiencing whatever happens. So
awesome.
Just reinforcing those points.
You just give the name of the book if you can think of it, or we'll put it into the show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Excellent. And then I have a rolling question. So every time I do a podcast, I ask our guest to provide a question for the next guest, without knowing who the next guest is.
Wow.
So your rolling question from our previous guest, which was Moshe David, was can AI take on the role of leadership? And what contribution does AI have to our role as leader or CEO or executive?
It's an excellent question. And I think no, AI will not replace leadership, it will not replace human leadership. But I think that as leaders, we should be drawing on the power of AI to do some of the other tasks for us, or do a first cut of our tasks to help us save time, to help us build processes. There's lots of things that AI can do to help us in our roles. And I think we need to embrace it.
Yeah.
And I think we need to understand it, and we need to use it in a really sensible and professional way so that it can help us and enhance everyone's experience.
Exactly. I love what you've said, because it's that first cut. For me, AI is not going to replace anything, but it helps us free some of our brain power for things that a robot can do, so that we can focus on the humanness, on the human qualities that we can bring to our roles and our who we are in the world.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks. I definitely agree with
that.
that. Last words of advice for our readers, anything, our readers, our listeners, anything that you feel like you want to say or leave our listeners with?
Yeah. I think reflecting on our conversation, Daphne, there's one thing that's come out that's very clear, and it's that everyone faces different challenges. Everyone faces different challenges in their careers, in their lives. No one has everything figured out. No one has a complete smooth journey through life. And I think if we can understand that and accept that and embrace that, and be mindful of what other people are going through at the same time, and that their challenges might be different from your challenges. But actually, if we all put our challenges out in front of us, we might be quite happy to pick our challenges back up. We might not want everybody else's challenges.
So true.
I think just being aware of that, having the self-awareness, and also having the empathy as well for the people around us, I think that stands us in really good stead in the workplace, as leaders, as individual contributors, and as humans.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are really, really powerful words, because I think that is what makes us human, is the challenges. Those are our growth points. Those are our learning points. That's how we develop and grow. So
Indeed.
We are going to put all of this in the show notes, but just tell us, how can people reach you?
Yep. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Julia Lessing. You can follow the Guardian Actuarial LinkedIn page. We have a website, www.guardianactuarial.com.au. All of the information about our leadership programs and training is on there as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. It was awesome to have you on the show. As I said, we've been waiting for this a long time, and I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel that we took it to a level of depth that was really meaningful. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And as always, we just have great conversations, and I look forward to more.
Thank you so much, Daphne.